We start episode 5 with our comatose Wednesday being read a novel by Morticia as a way to comfort her in the process of waking up. Now, with all the other comparisons I've made between season 1 and 2, and often the worst aspects being repeated between them, would you be surprised if I were to tell you that episode 4 and 5 of season 2 has a similar vague time jump as episode 4 and 5 of season 1 did? You bet your sweet ass it did! And this vague amount of time between Wednesday being thrown out the window to her being in this bed will all come at a head later. We got some more strange developments regarding Wednesday. Wednesday wakes up only to find the late Principal Weems pretending to be a nurse to treat her, with Wednesday assuming rightly that this is a mere hallucination, but the return of Weems in some capacity will be important very soon. Wednesday walks out of the clinic to a surreal visage of Weems' office and Weems greeting her in sarcastically cheery fashion. As it turns out, Wednesday did in fact have a spirit guide reach out to her, and Weems was that chosen candidate. Wednesday asks how that would be possible with the knowledge that only spirit guides familiar to her could reach out, and in we discover that Weems is related to Wednesday as 13th cousins twice removed. So, not only did this show inadvertently make Gomez and Morticia incestuous by what season 1 established, but that Weems had been hounding over a dude who was also very tangentially related to her as well. Not to mention, that also means that if Laurel had figured out that Weems was related to the Addams family this way, that she wouldn't have needed Wednesday to go about her ritual process either, but that's neither here nor there, as this line by Weems feels like an excuse to bring her and Gwendolyn Christie back after they unceremoniously killed her back in season 1. More on that unceremonious death later. Wednesday gets morally granted by Weems as to her failure in stopping that premonition from happening, along with abetting Tyler's escape of Willow Hill, and while I would praise a character to stomp whatever ego Wednesday has throughout this show, this information feels delivered solely for those who may have forgot between the month this episode released and the last one. And not to mention, writers, just because you acknowledge her mistakes doesn't mean that justifies you having her make them in the first place. Wednesday isn't here for the lectures and just simply wants to know how to regain her psychic ability, to which Weems says that her powers are tied to who you are, a line of reasoning that will be contradicted when Wednesday asks this question again in episode 6 as a way to stick it in Wednesday's face that she's been exploiting them for her own ends. Soon after, Weems does properly wake up Wednesday from this dream, and Weems' presence as Wednesday's spirit guide will be greater pronounced throughout episode 5 and 6, contrary to when Goody would only appear specifically in Wednesday's visions. But I suppose the writers forgot that, or that they did remember, and realized that having established Wednesday as having lost her powers would make Weems' presence minimalized. We cut to Judy Stonehurst giving a public statement about the calamity involving Willow Hill regarding the collection of the escaped residents along with the ongoing manhunt of the remaining few. Mainly, Judy states that it was 2 weeks since Willow Hill went lights out, and that while they had been successful in recapturing the escapees, that they will be relocated to different facilities as a result of Willow Hill being shut down for good. I'm not sure what kind of bullshit PR stunt Judy pulled to justify anything that had transpired there, as I imagine with how many people were killed and how many had escaped, that Judy would be neck deep in lawsuits, that she would be ruined publicly as a person. Also, with Judy stating her last name proves my point even more that Wednesday should not have been unwise to the connection she has with Stonehurst. After Judy gives her statement, Santiago chimes in about an ongoing manhunt of the 3 remaining fugitives of Willow Hill. That being Fester Addams, Slurp known as John Doe, and Tyler Galpin. With Fester and Tyler, I could buy that they managed to lay low elsewhere, but as for Slurp, how? He's a lumbering zombie who is as blunt as a sledgehammer and almost never tries to shroud himself unless it's for a cheap jump scare for his collective victims. And his continual means to escape the authorities will get more ridiculous the further we go on. After Santiago concludes her statement, she gets a text from her deputy that Wednesday has awoken, and Santiago lets Judy of all know about this. Apparently, between the 2 weeks that had transpired, Judy went with the cover story that Wednesday had no involvement in the failure of Willow Hill's security, and that she merely had an unauthorized visit with her Uncle Fester. This cover-up that Judy is spilling to Santiago should fall apart the moment Santiago questioned friends and family in the midst of Wednesday's coma, especially Morticia, who was told explicitly by Wednesday why Fester was even at Willow Hill in the first place. And more importantly, Santiago's interest in Wednesday waking up is down to her being at Willow Hill, meaning that Judy would have to hope upon hope that Wednesday wouldn't tattle to Santiago, or that her story would corroborate her own cover story too. And I guess in the 2 fucking weeks Wednesday was out, that Judy didn't feel of import to silence her permanently as well with what she likely knows, despite her having killed Galpin and Bradbury effortlessly earlier, so that's some incredible luck for all of that to happen the way it does. What Judy has seen fit to do in the 2 weeks since the Willow Hill incident was hire a personal hitman to take care of the escapees pertaining to the Lois program. This hitman is quite exceptional as he succeeded, save for one, and that one just so happens to be the mysterious woman that Wednesday personally escorted out, known to this hitman as Subject 1938, so we'll go by that name until it's pertinent. As for his apparent competence as a hitman, well, you can't tell me that he's this swift at finding these escapees in that small amount of time, but can't happen to find the one who will be narratively important for this show later. Back at the hospital, Wednesday is ready to leave before being inundated by Judy and her thinly veiled threat of welcome. Wednesday immediately tells Judy that she's left an anonymous tip to Santiago about looking up the Lois program lab, to which Judy says that all she'll find is some dusty boxes and that she's long since covered her tracks to incriminate her as responsible. We're going to find out just how much of a crock of shit that is when we get to episode 6, but even assuming that Judy is lying about that would require that she somehow physically buried the Lois program beyond any tracing back to her, which she also didn't do when we go back to that Lois lab in episode 6. Wednesday isn't the least bit intimidated by Judy wanting her to get her nose out of her business, before Judy states that if she does try to pry some more, that she'll tattle to Santiago that Wednesday had broken into Willow Hill illegally. So here's a good question. Why wasn't that the angle Judy went with as a means to implicate Wednesday into legal trouble for the foreseeable future then? And assuming that Judy did tell Santiago this, wouldn't Santiago find it a bit perplexing that Judy's narrative about Wednesday seemingly changed between her comatose and now? But apparently this angle does work on Wednesday because, as we all well know, Wednesday is a law-abiding citizen. So instead, Wednesday asks Judy who this Patient 1938 is and why they didn't get an obituary for them. So was that the reason Wednesday put more focus on this woman and none of the other lab experiments then? And oh, won't that detail get contradicted when we figure out who Patient 1938 is too? In Judy's hesitance, she pretends to not know, clocking to Wednesday that she still has some secrets to unbury and incriminate Judy with. As Wednesday storms out of her room, she gets greeted by a nurse who hands her a gift by way of some dead roses and a postcard. These gifts are little more than a calling card sent by none other than Tyler, who has perfectly disguised himself as a nurse in the 2 weeks that Wednesday has been out. So, bear with me, writers, but if Tyler does want Wednesday dead, why hasn't he made an attempt on her life in that amount of time, perchance? It's extremely dissonant that Tyler is going to send a note out that evil dies tonight, but won't actually carry out doing so unless Wednesday is conscious through it? Wednesday gives chase, only to quickly and dispassionately lose Tyler in what was barely even a curious glance around the halls, to a Tyler who seems to be getting sickly as of late. I would have expected a sloth to have more enthusiasm for someone who has tried to kill you twice and is going for a third round, but who am I to judge? We jump back to the Morning Song subplot where Gabrielle has tried to accommodate for her frankly shitty living conditions in this burnt out classroom. Speaking of burnt out, Bianca mentions that since last semester, this part of the school has been closed off to reassure Gabrielle that no one would find her. So I'm not sure if this part of the classroom was burned by what Crackstone did back in season 1, or that this classroom was burned outside of that event. But if it was burned out for that long ago, why hasn't anyone bothered to fix it then? Maybe Dort's a bit short on the bucks to do so, but I imagine even he would have tried to if he's aware of its close proximity to his own fucking office, no less. As for Gideon, while Bianca does reassure her of that, Ajax directs Bianca away from Gabrielle to give her some unsettling news. He says that while he was googling up Gideon, he found some report about his last whereabouts and how he seems to be nearing the approach to Nevermore from Boston. Ajax is surprised to discover that Bianca and her mom were involved in this scandal, to which Bianca exposits to Ajax what Morningsong was about and how she got roped up into it. Again, the dissonance between how Gabrielle treated Bianca back in Season 1 to now is noted, as if Gabrielle was only doing what she did to Bianca out of fear, that she wouldn't act particularly vain and smug about trying to reintroduce Bianca to the fold, even if there is consistency that Gideon only wanted Bianca as his suitable replacement once Gabrielle was deprived of her siren song. Also, I'm absolutely certain that Gideon will arrive at Nevermore in timely fashion for something else to transpire, and it most certainly will be contrived and nonsensical too. Anyhow, Wednesday returns to Ophelia Hall and to Enid, who only seems somewhat joyous that she's awake and recovered. Like seriously, does Enid care about Wednesday or not? To Wednesday's surprise, she's also seen Weems present to completely throw her out of her game to Enid's confusion. Yeah, it would be confusing that Weems would be present here and not in her visions as was already established in Season 1, but I guess we're just picking and choosing what to take from it. Enid thought that Wednesday was out recuperating at Morticia's cottage, to which Wednesday says,
"Ain't nobody got time for that,"
with Tyler out on the loose and with his own plans to kill the two of them. Interesting that Wednesday is going to be completely candid with Enid about Tyler trying to kill both of them, but not of her specific premonition of Enid dying and it being her fault. Enid isn't intimidated by Tyler as she was able to take him on last time, to which the conversation devolves into the two of them arguing the semantics of the entire fight sequence of episode 8 of season 1, concluding that both Enid and Wednesday were lucky that the circumstances happened the way they did. You know what they don't bring up that was lucky? That Enid just so happened to wolf out at that exact moment that Wednesday wanted to confront Tyler with little more than her stony gaze. Something that I guess Wednesday would have expected to happen somehow? Weems wants Wednesday to tell Enid about her premonition, and Wednesday gets audibly annoyed by Weems chiming in. Enid is once more confused by who Wednesday thinks she's talking to, before Wednesday once more drills it into Enid's skull that she's trying to save her. As though Enid forgot about her crying about Wednesday hanging out with someone who did attempt to kill her, Enid states that she doesn't need saving and assumes that Wednesday put her on lookout for that exact reason, before storming out in a huff that she would think of her so low. Congratulations, writers! You have successfully made Enid unlikable. I hope it was worth the drama you're trying to force into the story like a hard pill to swallow, because I don't know how Enid can simultaneously want Wednesday to look out for her, but not look out for her this way. Episode 5 does return the mantra of the school flavor of the day, with Dia de los Muertos specifically being that school flavor. Now, with every other school theme of the day presented in the Wednesday show, the show has gotten off with making that day as vague and arbitrary as they needed to be. But with the Day of the Dead, that holiday happens specifically on November the 1st, and this will cause problems for, you guessed it, the timing of things between the prior episodes. But also that Tyler, by Wednesday's monologue, chose to plan his killing of her and Enid on this day, and not in the 2 weeks while she was completely helpless to stop him, or when he did have the perfect opportunity to back in episode 4, so good thing it contrived itself that way. Weems interjects around the festival goings on in her usually snarky fashion, wondering if a memorial was in place for her on part of her sacrificing herself for the school. Weems, you didn't sacrifice yourself for shit. You stood still like a statue and got vaxxed by Nightshade. Sacrifice would entail trading your own life for the life of someone else, and you certainly did not trade your life to save Wednesday's, nor did you even trade your life to save any of the school students or the school for that matter. But I suppose Weems expecting some kind of memorandum for her is to juxtapose with the legacy she carried, as she's disgusted to see the new principal having fun by way of t-shirt cannon to commemorate the Day of the Dead ceremony, making light of the supposed professionalism that Weems carried through Nevermore. I mean, so far, Dort hasn't gotten people killed, nor has he tried to cover up his shortcomings, so he must be more professional than you, Weems, and by the extension, the writers for trying to convince us that Dort is somehow a joke compared to her. Wednesday comes to Dort, who is delighted to see she's made a swift recovery in time for his ceremony, apparently not aware of her reasons for being off campus at Willow Hill in that frame of time too, to ask him to cancel the ceremony under concern that Tyler has plans to assault Nevermore. Dort says that he's invited some donors to the ceremony such that he has too much riding on them to just cancel it abruptly like this, adding that,
in the remote off chance Tyler Galpin breaches our wall, we have a school full of outcasts ready to take him on.
Stop the cap!
Boy, you just got to love how the show has characters remind the audience that Nevermore is full of outcasts, only to forget that when it would otherwise inconvenience the plot. How many more times will that get in the way of the story they're trying to tell by the time I even complete Season 2? Dort mentions to Wednesday that Miss Capri has had a run-in with a Hyde as their collective credentials for dealing with Tyler if and when he makes his mark on Nevermore. Once more, this detail will not be relevant for Miss Capri to defend Nevermore when he arrives, but purely for Wednesday to poke Miss Capri's head about what she knows of Hyde's for later. Wednesday decides for Weems' sake if Dort plans to honor her legacy, Dort utterly grimacing at the prospect of honoring a woman that by his own perspective was a stain on Nevermore, much to Weems' ire of hearing all of this. I mean, no lies detected on Dort's part, because I don't know how you could see what Weems did as little more than self-interest disguised as guarding Nevermore, at least from an outcast's perspective. We tune back to Pugsley, who's feeling quite glum on account of losing Slurp, and that Slurp is on the loose. Of course, because the show decides he's a retard, his concern only goes as far as that they might put him down and that it's not his fault that he's hungry to Gomez. That's quite morally reprehensible of Pugsley to only think that Slurp has no autonomy, especially when we know he's gained enough of one to go after Augustus Stonehurst personally and play more where that comes from after him as well. So, suffice it to say, the show has not been made aware of Pugsley's disregard for letting this monster loose. Gomez makes some anecdote about Fester owning a chupacabra at his age and that some animals aren't meant to be made as pets, with Pugsley rebutting that he had raised Slurp from the dead and feels it's his responsibility to take care of him. Although, yet again, he only feels responsible for what the authorities might do to him if they find him, and not if he goes on another feeding frenzy. The slack-jawed, door-licking idiot he is. Gomez offers to help Pugsley to find the zombie, which means that Gomez will also become culpable for however Pugsley chooses to deal with Slurp when we get there, and by extension, if Slurp kills several more people afterward. We cut to the hitman, by the way, good trigger discipline on display here, looking for subject 1938 and notices some footprint marks that lead to some abandoned aqueduct or sewer, who knows. Inside said sewer, we find Tyler rattled and losing his mind, likely as a result of killing his master. This psychosis of his extends to seeing a hallucination of Sheriff Galpin in his prime, monologuing to Tyler about the mess he's made for himself and how his mother would feel seeing him like this. Now, with Galpin being brought back in this limited fashion, and all this being in Le Head, I'm going to take everything that Galpin confides in Tyler with a huge grain of salt, as it's Tyler's projection of how he perceives of his father talking to him. It's basically on the same level as when Kylo Ren was forgiven by his father for killing him, when that Han Solo was just Kylo Ren's own subconscious, so he was basically forgiving himself for killing his father. For example, Tyler admonishes Galpin for letting this happen, with Galpin countering that he tried to protect him, and Tyler counters that by saying his means to protect Tyler was to bottle it all up, literally and figuratively, and Galpin side-eyes that as though a fair argument. This for me is not any confirmation that Galpin knew that Tyler was out rampaging, and is little more than Tyler projecting what he perceives as weaknesses of his father to this corporeal veneer of him, so suck it, writers. Galpin says that Tyler is in deep shit and needs to turn himself in before things get worse, before Tyler screams this inner conscious of his away from himself. And while I thought the sudden heel turn Tyler made in Season 1 wasn't emblematic of his acting prowess, Hunter Duhan in Season 2 does do a fair job of portraying a tormented psycho throughout this show and his anguish in this very moment. In the midst of Tyler's crash out, the hitman has scoured his way into the entrance to this aqueduct and readies his weapon for what he likely assumes is the target he's looking for. as it wasn't already signposted, this hitman will be made another casualty of Tyler, who gets tricked into letting his guard down through some mannequin that he assumes was his target, and this hitman's death will service two things beyond just getting another kill on Tyler's belt, being 9 now, with the events of Season 1 in mind. The amount of bodies that Tyler has killed will be important regarding the morality of other characters throughout this show, and the show's own morality towards his actions in Season 1. We cut back to Miss Capri's music room, where Wednesday has seen fit to go snooping into her desk for any info about her relationship with this Hyde. Exposited by Wednesday, Miss Capri was in a relationship with a Hyde named Alfie Penn, who at one point lashed out and killed their master and themselves in the commotion, Miss Capri only being spared as a result of a full moon, as our only inkling as to what powers Miss Capri even has, although you could say it was foreshadowed with her concern towards Enid about there being a full moon back in episode 3. Wednesday wants to know more about this Hyde from Miss Capri, who is initially hesitant to respond before Wednesday uses Tyler as her moral punching bag to pipe up. Miss Capri states that Alfie Penn's master fell in love with him and ordered him to take out Miss Capri to uncomplicate things, with some added knowledge that apparently female Hydes are more resilient to the lack of a master over male Hydes. Huh. So you mean to tell me that Miss Capri knows that, but not Dr. Faulkner, who had died researching these monsters specifically? That's awfully convenient and not totally pulled out of your ass. And the distinction of female Hydes being stronger than male Hydes will be important regarding Tyler later as well. Wednesday asks if a Hyde has ever been given a new master, wherein Miss Capri says, not that she knows of. This gives Wednesday
A wonderful, awful idea.
To attempt to be Tyler's master because of Capri saying it would be a reckless idea to try. And despite Miss Capri's objections, Wednesday will fully commit to this plan of hers, as opposed to just killing the fuck out of Tyler instead. Like, are we supposed to see this as a morally good thing for her to do this? Or does Wednesday think this is the only possible solution to her Hyde problem? We swing back to Slurp, who has also discovered the same aqueduct Tyler killed that hitman in, and him waltzing in to eat what remains of the hitman. Lucky that he and Tyler didn't butt heads here as well, is important to Slurp, as this hitman has the photos of the lowest escapees, but most pertinently, the photo of subject 1938, as this Slurp is somewhat aware of who this person is to him. How? Well, that will be better saved for episode 6. Back at the Rosewood Cottage, that location will have greater significance than you'd realize. Wednesday is out pouring through the notes that the late Laurel Gates wrote to find any means of which to control Tyler like she did. We get a small, but significant establishment of what Weems can do, as despite being Wednesday's spirit guide, she can physically interact with things like she does here with a portrait of Laurel. And Weems will do this again in short order, as though it's not a big deal that she can do this when, if she wanted to, could bitch slap Dort if she fucking felt like it. As for Weems being here, she once again argues that she gave up her life to save the school, and that her legacy was tarnished simply by hiring Laurel at Nevermore. Weems, your legacy was tarnished when you covered up Rowan's murder, downplayed Eugene's near-death experience, and ran interference for Mayor Walker to boost up your collective clout. Hiring Laurel was just the cherry on the shit sundae that was your career. The bickering between Wednesday and Weems gets cut short by Morticia walking in, catching Wednesday once more talking to herself in the midst of pouring through Laurel's things. Morticia is curious why Wednesday is digging into these things, as she planned to have Lurch burn them, with Wednesday giving her cunt-like reproach that it's in Morticia's nature to burn things that are important to her. Hold on, Wednesday. How the fuck would Morticia had known you were going to control a Hyde unless you told her, you stupid twat? And aren't you giving the game away what you plan on doing with these books by saying it's vital to you, as Morticia would likely conclude that it yet again has to do with your premonition? Color me shocked that always wanting to have the last fucking word makes you the laughingstock. Morticia ignores that snide remark and wants to converse with Wednesday about getting in touch with her on this Day of the Dead, and supposedly does not poise any concern about why Wednesday was at Willow Hill despite Wednesday's explicit motivation for sending Fester there. Weems does her remark to Morticia, as it was very, very briefly touched on that Weems dislikes Morticia, and Morticia presumably can sense Weems in the room but has not been made entirely aware of her yet. Yet, as I emphasize, as her being made aware of Weems will factor in what transpires episode 6. Morticia only manages to figure out that Wednesday is attempting to wrestle control of Tyler by, I shit you not, Weems physically pushing the book Wednesday was pouring into towards Morticia's direction. I guess Morticia is just as unperceptive as Wednesday is, as anything to do with looking into Laurel's notes should lead one to infer that they want to be the master of a fucking Hyde. But nope, guess Morticia literally needs it spelled out to her in writing. Once more, Morticia pleads Wednesday not to pursue this option on vengeance, and once more, second verse same as the first, Wednesday wants Morticia not to butt in on her schemes and excuses herself. Morticia being made the proverbial doormat for every other time she's tried to stop Wednesday plotting. We cut to Enid and Bruno having a picnic date where Bruno tells Enid that while she had faced off a Hyde before, that Wednesday did make a compelling case that she only got so lucky to fend Tyler off the last time. As though Enid just wanted Bruno to be her personal mouthpiece, she frowns at that notion he would even think Wednesday has a point. Bruno doesn't take any offense to this, and believes it's a good call to call off Nevermore for a few weeks while Tyler is at large. I didn't have any opinions about Bruno up to this point, but this conversation alone has made me start to like him as a character, as I initially wrote him off as some himbo for Enid to get head over heels over. But seeing him make some sound logic while still appealing to Enid's feelings really did bump my respect for him. Too bad, too fucking bad really, that episode 6 will immediately dash any goodwill I had for him from this point. Bruno states that Enid can't fight Tyler alone, which also gives Enid a whimsical idea such that she runs off from the picnic date to plan her own means to deal with Tyler. This plan involves Thing, and will involve Agnes because of course it would, as her invisibility can and will be utilized when the plot needs her to, as Enid plans to reinstate the Nightshades by sending postcards to Ajax and other ex-Nightshades to arrive at Iago Tower at night as their new Order of the Phoenix. Honestly, the parallels between Harry Potter and this show are razor thin between them, but nevertheless, we will find what this plan entails. Meanwhile, Gomez and Pugsley are out calling for their dog to no avail, as they've presumably been at this for hours looking for him. They decide to give up the search and discover a bunch of townsfolk heading towards Pilgrim World to some kind of Day of the Dead themed event that interests the two of them to go. And them going to this, and Slurp, who was just round the corner as they were calling out for him, noticing them go, will be important for later, but I cannot stress just how lazily the writers put these characters in close proximity to them when Slurp would have no reason to even seek out Pugsley past this point. The police have arrived to scope out the battered remains of the hitman's corpse, with Santiago's deputy suggesting that because of his brain matter missing and of his lacerations, believes that Slurp and Tyler are working in cahoots with one another. I mean, this will become more true when we get into episode 6, but as of now, this seems like a stretch that even Santiago finds perplexing, so perhaps this was more of the writers laying on thick the foreshadowing. But the main squeeze of the police doing an autopsy on this body is that the deputy corroborates this victim's autopsy with the one of the driving instructor back in episode 2 that to these cops happened a month ago. With the events between episode 2 and 5 occurring over a month, including the 2 weeks Wednesday was out, and if this episode takes place on Day of the Dead, means that the events of episode 1 and 2 also have taken place over the course of a month, if we assume Nevermore starts school around the first week of September. The problem with this, of course, is that we have to assume that Wednesday was out for a whole month from her vision and that Morticia didn't feel of import to send her to the hospital in that time, or we have to assume that between Wednesday seeing Galpin's body and going to Willow Hill that a month passed by, despite plenty of characters talking about Galpin's death as though it happened yesterday in that episode. Unless I'm just supposed to take at face value that Nevermore starts school unusually late because it's a boarding school and not your typical K-12 school, the timeline of these things is completely broken by what this single cop says. With Santiago aware that this victim was in close proximity to Nevermore, she decides to have squad cars on watch around Nevermore as a deterrent to Tyler. Which means that Wednesday never once brought up to Santiago that she saw Tyler at the hospital, or brought up any concern about Tyler going there either, and had she, would make her dim-shitted plan to control Tyler unnecessary. as far as she's concerned, and do keep in note these squad cars keeping their vigil on Nevermore important for later. There's a quick scene where our subject 1938 has found themselves some sort of bunker with a radio that signals the danger Tyler poses, as well as these cops having put all their focus solely on Nevermore. And her hearing about Tyler and his plans to go to Nevermore will all come at a head once we do discover who this person is, and lucky she just so happened to hear this specific broadcast from the police at this time. Gomez and Pugsley arrive at Pilgrim World, transformed, or for the sake of this show's virtue signaling, appropriated into its own Day of the Dead festival. The two get greeted by Miss Arlene, who tries to buy the authenticity of this festival, with Gomez getting a one-up on her by speaking in fluent Spanish, Arlene perplexed by what he even said. Seeing as I did bring up the heavy-handedness of Season 1's political gerrymandering, I suppose Season 2 isn't lapsed in that either, although the examples I have seen so far have been an eyebrow raise less so than direct confirmation of the writer's hand shown in the characters speaking. As for Gomez doing this, I don't know what he's trying to prove here, that she can't speak Spanish? Okay, wasn't aware that was a prerequisite for enjoying Day of the Dead or having a festival about it, but hope that preachiness was worth it. Gomez and Pugsley leave Arlene in distraught while surveying the rest of the festivities, while Serp gives chase to the bewilderment of no one, as it's written off as him merely donning a compelling zombie costume. I guess Santiago didn't hand out wanted posters abound, despite apparently having a wanted poster for a crime Fester committed a year ago for people to make the connection? Hack at Ophelia Ball. Wednesday is monologuing while commending Laurel's psychopathy and making notes that may help her to save Enid from Tyler before she calls out for Weems to attempt to assist her in all of this. Once more, Agnes is just a moment away to hear her say this, who expresses her concern and infatuation with Wednesday in the 2 weeks she was soaporogues. So I guess Agnes being this obsessed with Wednesday was a writer's barely disguised correction for Tyler not attempting to kill her while she was out for those 2 weeks then? The main reason Agnes is here with Wednesday is to deliver her Enid's plan to reinstate the Nightshades by having pilfered one of her invitation postcards to show to Wednesday. Speaking of, the ex-Nightshades arrive at Iago Tower, and predictably, Ajax, Bianca, and Kent were the only ones to arrive here. I guess we also have to assume that they were told how to get in Iago Tower in the first place, otherwise this would be a no-show. Ajax ponders who arranged this meeting before Enid and Bruno arrived to announce that she was the one who did so, regardless if she was properly inducted as a Nightshade. Ajax really wants to argue the formalities of this whole arrangement before Bianca shoos him down, and more than likely his frustration with Enid doing this is twofold, especially with Bruno present. Enid tells Ajax that Tyler has plans to kill her, and her knowing of this came from Wednesday, who just so happens to pipe up unannounced to the surprise of everyone and chagrin of Enid. Enid isn't going to let Wednesday stop her means to deal with Tyler, so Wednesday acquiesces while going along with her plan to control Tyler, bereft of how Enid deals with him. And because Wednesday is still going through with her plan to control Tyler, means that she will deliberately put Enid in danger such that she can accomplish her goals, despite her whole reason even doing this hinging on Enid being in danger. More on the factors of that plan later. Wednesday breaks into Orloff's classroom to make some kind of concoction that will help her in controlling Tyler, gaining the assistance of Thing to collect some materials while a montage of her making the brew unfold. Remember when Nightshade, material not the group, was a notable component back in Season 1 and not just some offhanded mention? Oh, the memories. In the midst of doing this, Weems comes to wave her finger at Wednesday for doing this, including her putting Enid deliberately in harm's way in order to take control of Tyler, adding on that Wednesday has no assurance she can even get close enough to jab him with this needle, nor know if the concoction will even work. Wednesday doesn't have much to retort beyond that she thinks herself doing the moral thing of putting Tyler back in his cage, and Weems scoffs at that notion that Wednesday has ever done anything altruistic. Moreover, Weems says that Laurel was able to control Tyler because she was detached in her methodology, apparently not with her pleas back in episode 4, whereas Wednesday clearly has feelings for him. And Wednesday, oddly enough, interprets that line as romantic to state that she simply hates him. Wow. Way to go on not understanding what Weems was getting across, seeing as Wednesday gives the perfect layup for Weems to state that hate and contempt are feelings. But if Weems has established that she can physically interact with things and has these many objections to what Wednesday is doing, couldn't she just break her entire chemistry set right here and now? Or are we deciding this time that Weems is ethereal in nature? Weems says that even if Wednesday is successful, that Tyler may turn on her like she did Laurel, something that Weems could not possibly know had happened, as her final objection to what Wednesday plans to do. Of course, Wednesday is as headstrong as a raging bull and carries on with her plan regardless. Back at Pilgrim World, Serp is wandering about the place and finds himself in some kind of haunted house mock-up, getting spooked himself from some of the attractions before bumping into some kind of punk who gives him attitude. Serp decides to give him a piece of mind while taking his, making that Slurp's 7th victim that Pugsley, Wednesday, and Fester have inadvertently caused. And Serp killing this random festival goer will also facilitate Tyler's means to get into Nevermore in a moment. Miss Arlene is doing her festival thing before she notices a bunch of scared festival goers leaving from that haunted house attraction. She initially plays it off as some kind of rehearsed part of the festival before getting suspicious enough to investigate herself. As she comes in, she sees Slurp suckle the smarts out of that sleaze and assumes he too was employed to scare the shit out of the goers before realizing that he really is method acting that punk's brains out. At the gates of Nevermore, one of the deputies notifies Santiago that there are multiple 911 calls about a zombie going on a killing spree at Pilgrim World, causing Santiago to focus their attention over there as opposed to here. Now, beyond how contrived it is that Jericho's forces are so thinly spread that they couldn't just have a few cops take care of Slurp while still on lookout on Nevermore, but Santiago changing priority will serve as pointless and morally bankrupt drama into episode 6, as though immediate danger to the citizenry should take a backseat to the possible motivation of Tyler to slink his way into Nevermore. But no, what you don't realize is the show is trying to make a point that Santiago cares about normies more so than outcasts. At least that's what episode 6 apparently concludes. And yes, these cop cars having left Nevermore does indeed allow Tyler, who I guess was also just around the corner and waiting, to climb his way over the front gates into Nevermore. Lucky for him that Slurp was a perfect diversion yet again to allow another antagonist to go unabated like he did in episode 4. At Pilgrim World once more, Pugsley and Gomez find it only slightly peculiar that a bunch of festival goers are running for their life until one of the patrons just exposits to Pugsley and Gomez that a killer zombie is on the loose in one of the attractions. Pugsley immediately knows this to be Slurp, and while Gomez cautions Pugsley to confront Slurp at duress of his own safety, Pugsley reassures Gomez that he can take care of Slurp when and if he gets dangerous to him, and leaves Gomez to ponder. Oh, won't that fare badly for Gomez's own culpability later? Pugsley walks his way into the haunted house and inevitably finds Slurp cowering behind some mannequins. Pugsley immediately shocks him when he dares get close, only for Slurp to share his first words with Pugsley, calling him by his name and how he was able to regain a part of himself. Keep this in mind with how Slurp tries to plead to Pugsley. As the two do, Santiago and her entourage come and arm the perimeter, calling for Slurp to turn himself in while Gomez is in witness to this. Assuming that Santiago believes that this dude is a zombie, how does she expect him to understand what the fuck she's even saying? And where is the SWAT cars if this dude has killed at least 2 people by their knowledge, and who knows how many more inside of that building? Oh, speaking of killing, with Pugsley within earshot of hearing this, Slurp decides to plead to Pugsley to let him go on account of giving him a second chance of life and being his only friend. Now, Slurp being the callous, cold-hearted son of a bitch that I've seen of him, and will see of him, it would make perfect sense that Slurp would try to plead to the only person who has some kind of bond with him. But for Pugsley, not only to hear him out, but let him go, as he lets Slurp out the back fucking door, is absurdly irresponsible for Pugsley to do. Not only for Pugsley to be contradictory as to believing he's responsible for him, but also for knowing full well Slurp has killed and will kill more people after being set loose again. If Pugsley sincerely believes that Slurp deserves a second chance on life, then I guess fuck the 7 people who lost their first chance of life just to perpetuate his by his flagrantly moronic standards. And Pugsley knows it must be that many because that punk's corpse would still be warm by the time Pugsley got into that house and more than likely would see it when waltzing in. At this point, Pugsley might as well be Slurp's accomplice with how much he runs interference for him, simply because Pugsley is so pea-brained to accept any friend, even if foe. As Pugsley abets this doubled-over serial killer, Gomez notices Slurp slink out the back, with the two sharing a glance that has more subtext behind it than you'd realize, while Pugsley walks into the front to notify the police that it was just him inside that building. Pugsley lies to Gomez that he couldn't find him, and Gomez, knowing full well this is a fucking lie, plays into it that it was likely for the best that they didn't. So now, Gomez has officially been added to the list of those complicit in Slurp's killings, at least pertaining to the killing of that punk and any afterward. With 3 Addams family members already being made unwilling accomplices to his actions, I wonder if Morticia will somehow play into his actions later. But Morticia will hold a different, yet special place of contempt for later. Speaking of, Morticia is setting the stage for her own Day of the Dead ceremony before being randomly inundated with who else but Subject 1938. This subject also knows Morticia well, and Morticia to her as Francois, who, if that name rings a bell, was the name very briefly mentioned being none other than Tyler Galpin's mother, who Wednesday assumed died as a Hyde and was covered up as a postpartum depression. So let's get into the meat of just how badly this fucks up the timeline of things, now knowing who she is. Initially, I didn't take anything about Francois's death being ruled as a postpartum depression until I realized that in order for this cover-up to be convincing would require that Francois had died shortly after giving birth to Tyler, as this condition is specifically tied to childbirth. As for how old Tyler is in this story going into season 2, we can only guess that he's anywhere from 15 to 18 years of age, although we will get more concrete evidence of his age into episode 6, if Nevermore is trying to poise itself as a high school with all the stupid drama that comes with it. So, in those 15 years that Francois's death was ruled as that, had went completely under the nose of Sheriff Galpin, who must have also been lied to about the circumstances of her death, but that now also means that Galpin wasn't merely afraid of Tyler becoming a Hyde and suffering a similar fate if he had known how she actually died. And if Galpin did know how she died, means that he would have already noticed a similar pattern with outcast patients seemingly dying at Willow Hill far before Tyler had even been sent there. But remember, Francois apparently did not get an obituary writ out for her. But that also doesn't make sense, as Wednesday apparently got a biopsy on her from Willow Hill back in episode 8 of season 1, meaning that there also wouldn't have been a death certificate and thereby a obituary for her regardless if she was a Hyde or not. Also, Weems said in episode 7 of season 1 that Hydes were officially banned at Nevermore 30 years ago, meaning that Francois having attended Nevermore and building a friendship with Morticia would have had to occur prior to that. Despite that Morticia and Gomez attended Nevermore around the same time they were outlawed. So did Francois go to a different school to have shacked up with Galpin, or was just fortuitous enough to attend it before that ban too? Regarding the time between her experimentation at the Lois program and now is perplexing as to how soon Judy got involved with it and whether Judy had a hand in putting Francois there personally. Also, if Francois is a Hyde, means that it also makes no sense for her to be seemingly off of her chains when she could have broken out of that cell much easier than most. So I guess we just have to assume she became hopeless to even try until Wednesday conveniently took pity on her and let her out. Lucky that this person just so happened to be Tyler's mother. As for Francois managing to even get to this cottage before Tyler did, yeah, your guess is as good as mine, unless this cottage is outside Nevermore grounds yet simultaneously is within walking distance of it. I don't even know how Francois knew Morticia would be in this cottage beyond supposedly seeing her cut roses in the middle of the night. I'm sure Morticia probably has a lot of questions about Francois being here and whether she's hallucinating her even being alive at this moment. Plenty she will not remotely entertain. Including, but not limited to, Francois telling Morticia that Wednesday helped her escape the Lois program once she sees a portrait of Wednesday on their countertop. coming as a complete surprise to Morticia, both in where Francois had been and of Wednesday doing that. No fucking shit, Sherlock. Not like Wednesday fucking told you her intentions earlier. Morticia thinks it's possibly a good idea to call the cops to his sister as Francois gets these coughing fits. This too will be narratively important for later, before Francois shoots down that option on the concern that someone is out hunting for her, whether that be that dead hitman or Judy on her own moxie. The main reason that Francois came here to Morticia is that she needs help in finding her son, as she too believes Tyler intends to storm Nevermore, and Morticia concludes that Tyler is here for Wednesday. This is a scene that, yet again, cuts off before the conversation properly ends, as the two arrange something that will disrupt both Wednesday and Enid's plan, and the circumstances of this arrangement are important to understand Morticia's rationale for agreeing to it. The Outcast Day of Remembrance commences in solemn fashion, with Tyler having inexplicably found himself a cloak to cloak himself amongst the crowd, while Wednesday and the crew are on the outskirts waiting to make their play. Enid asks Wednesday if Tyler will even come, a question that should have been first on Wednesday's mind before even doing this, but regardless, she sticks to it, with Thing watching the crowd from a vantage point. Dort mentions some outcast phenotypes that don't walk the earth anymore, so in a sense are extinct by how he describes them as, while Thing gives the thumbs up once he notices Tyler amongst the crowd. Wow! Didn't know hands have imperceptive sight like this. That would have been useful when he got gutted back in episode 7 of season 1. With Thing giving Wednesday the signal, the group go into position, with Wednesday positing that Tyler needs to transform and that they can't merely improvise this plan. Unfortunately, a lot of improvising will be done purely on Wednesday's part, meaning that Wednesday was completely bullshitting and also didn't expect outside factors to occur. Thing gets Tyler's attention by throwing a pebble at him and points him to Enid, who is perfectly poised like a deer in headlights for Tyler to give chase to. I'm sure you're wondering why Tyler doesn't immediately suspect this to be a trap with how scripted this whole thing is, but when he does route Enid to this abandoned building, he does assert that Enid isn't acting alone in all of this. Of course, Enid isn't, with she and the Nightshades all armed with swords towards Tyler. Tyler isn't intimidated by it and attempts to transform, but finds the process difficult while the Nightshades taunt him for it, as opposed to trying to throttle him from transforming. And if you think that won't work, yeah, episode 6 of season 2 will disprove that as such. Of course, the Nightshades aren't trying to fight Tyler, but distract him long enough for Wednesday to get the jump on him with her needle. Once Tyler has properly transformed, Wednesday makes her approach, but unfortunately, Tyler heard her from behind and slaps her clear from him. This prompts Ajax to attempt to stone him, which, again, why didn't he open with that before Tyler transformed? But Tyler swipes he and presumably Bianca, Kent, and Bruno away while Enid falls down in fright. The choreography here is a bit confusing as to what transpired, but perhaps the writers once again treated Bianca and Kent as non-existent for the sake of it. With Enid on the ground, Tyler has the perfect opportunity to go kill her, what with there being no full moon, before Wednesday gets his attention merely by calling out to him. Somehow this works, and as Tyler has his third chance to go kill Wednesday, Wednesday tries to trick him by stating that she was infatuated with him, alluding to what he said back in episode 2. Tyler once more disarmed in the moment for Wednesday to go plug Tyler as his new master. But in we get Deus Hyde Machina, as Francois, transformed as a Hyde, comes between both Tyler and Wednesday, and seems prepared to kill Wednesday herself for what she likely assumed was trying to kill Tyler through lethal injection. Morticia just so happens to stumble in to stop Francois short of killing Wednesday by reminding her of the deal they made. What deal that was apparently made off screen and for the benefit of the writers not to elaborate? We shall know very soon. But as for Francois and Morticia being here, how did they know that Wednesday and Enid had planned to stake Tyler at this abandoned church? How did Francois time her approach at just the moment that Wednesday was going to attempt to make Tyler his new master? Well, regardless of all that, Francois is able to escort Tyler away from all this, while Morticia bemoans Wednesday for what should have been plainly obvious to her the moment she found Wednesday battered at Willow Hill, or perhaps bemoaning Wednesday's futile attempt to take control of Tyler. Morticia is so furious at Wednesday that if she pipes up one more time that she'll personally take her out of Nevermore, and despite Wednesday uttering a peep, Morticia does not, in fact, hold true to that threat. But more on Morticia's callous disregard for things in a hot minute, as Wednesday is surprised to hear that the Hyde who escorted Tyler away is in fact his mother and the one whom she escorted out of Willow Hill, while curious as to what deal these two arranged. Morticia says that Francois will take control of Tyler while making themselves scarce from Jericho, and Wednesday poses a good query as to how Morticia can even be certain she can trust Francois. And in Morticia says,
I believe the word of a mother.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
okay, Morticia, regardless if you think Francois is good on her word, you do realize that Tyler has killed 9 people, 8 by what you likely know of Wednesday's own testimony. He shouldn't be allowed to see the fucking light of day with his actions, much less be allowed to roam free with his mother just on the basis of motherly trust. Also, given you don't know Francois all that well, nor know if she's changed in the 15 years she was secluded from society, how can you be so certain that she's completely altruistic in her actions? And does Francois know that Tyler has killed people between her internment and now? Or was that not part of the discussion when you two were making that deal? Because sure, Francois did come to you to help collect Tyler by precept of him being a Hyde, but she doesn't know who was his former master, nor what they got up to in that amount of time either. Also, knowing the events of episode 6, Francois is not as good on her word as Morticia claims, as we'll also discover, making her extremely loose appeal to kinship worthless and morally dubious as well. So do keep in mind, if Francois and or Tyler kill or abet the killing of people after her decision henceforth, as that will be blood on Morticia's hands as well, completing the Addams family's culpability regarding our central antagonists. And the final scenes of episode 5 are more of those monologues paired with scene transitions, some of which aren't particularly useful and others I'll briefly touch over. Gomez goes to Morticia and says that the zombie Pugsley has been chasing and shared glances with is Isaac, with Morticia also giving Gomez a bombshell that Francois is also alive. Judy gets bombarded by Slurp/Isaac, who deals with her similarly to how he dealt with her father, and Enid transforms into a werewolf absent of a full moon, which means so much for that being a restriction on her defending herself, in witness to Miss Capri. The significance of Slurp being named Isaac and Morticia notifying Gomez of Francois will factor chiefly into episode 6, so for future I will refer to Slurp as Isaac going forward, but with Isaac having now also killed Judy means that 2 deaths are on Gomez's hands, 6 that are on Wednesday and Fester's hands, and all 8 of his kills on Pugsley's hands. And there's even more where that comes from, if you can believe that, when we get into episode 6. As for Enid turning into a werewolf sans full moon, that will bear some significance into episode 6 and perhaps a new conceit of Enid beyond which boy she wants to bounce on their lap for. Also, with Judy being killed means that the entire avian mystery is closed shut, and even more important is that Morticia's sister being a likely culprit was a red herring and a nothing burger in one, seeing as I had assumed that the woman Wednesday freed from the Lois program was her Aunt Ophelia, as episode 5 through 8 have decided to be narratively disjointed from episodes 1 through 4 of season 2, as was already evident. With that, that concludes episode 5, which isn't the worst episode of season 2, but it is most certainly the most morally repugnant of the entire show. What with the collective Addams family abetting the murders by characters they should be more than wary to let slide, the inevitable moral grandstanding that will be levied on the cops and or Nevermore, and of Wednesday's insistence to fall on the sword that Laurel tried to plunge into her, are all complimentary of a show that is confused in how the audience should perceive the characters we should be rooting for. But there will be more ire to say for this show now going into episode 6. The Wednesday show going into episode 6 is going to be taken into a very, very strange turn, as it starts off with Wednesday having presumably lost her mind as she's wearing glitzy colors, dancing a bunch, and making a public spectacle of herself to the rest of the Nevermore students. There will be a reason for this to occur, but for a first-time viewer of this show coming from the dour and dull season 1, seeing this will be the kind of whiplash that will turn your neck into a pretzel. There's a title card with an arbitrary amount of time before Wednesday wanted to evoke Enid, hintity hint, where Wednesday, Enid, and the Adams are being questioned by Dort and Santiago about the events that transpired at that cemetery in episode 5. Wednesday chastises Dort, although somehow lumps Santiago into this, that she explicitly warned him about Tyler and that Enid and them were only so lucky to divert his attention away from the ceremony and have their plans foiled with Francois butting in. Of course, Wednesday, as always, thinks she's the smartest person in the room as she proclaims her plan went accordingly, not even in the slightest even disregarding the Hyde intrusion, so do prepare your anus for more of her grandstanding later. Dort dismisses Enid as Santiago rips into the Adams about the sudden revelation of there being a second Hyde and of Francois being that Hyde after presumed dead for 15 years, according to her. So, with that explicit amount of time means that Tyler is currently 15 years of age during the events of Season 2, and 14 regarding the events of Season 1, and importantly, this is within the years of 2022 to 2023. I'm putting strict attention to these numbers as Episode 8 will bend the timing of things in the least unlikely way you would expect. After Wednesday chimes in that Francois was being experimented upon by Judy and her father, Santiago raises a good point that none of this incriminating info was brought to her attention, only for Morticia to butt in that she allowed Francois and Tyler to flee based solely on the notion that Francois is good on her word. Dort sees the bright side of this, although more than likely he's just trying to dust this off his shoulder quick as he can, but Santiago is not having any of this, saying,
I should arrest you right here for aiding and abetting a murderer.
And honestly, based response as far as I'm concerned, because Morticia has no way of knowing Francois will be good on her word, and Morticia's own words are going to seriously bite her in the ass later. And whether Morticia does believe she is good on her word, Tyler is still a career criminal who shouldn't ever see the light of day again. So Wednesday and Gomez decide to play defense for Morticia, with Wednesday chastising Santiago for prioritizing saving normies at Pilgrim World over the outcasts, with Gomez adding that having done that would look bad on the public. Where to even start with this nonsense? First off, Wednesday never told or warned Santiago about the prospect of Tyler even going to Nevermore, nor even knew Santiago had planned to defend it until now, and Santiago only managed to do this because of discovering the hitman's corpse in close proximity to Nevermore in the first place. So if Santiago didn't discover that body, she'd have no reason to think to defend Nevermore based on what Wednesday didn't tell her, the stupid cunt. As for Gomez, yeah, tell me how bad it would look on the cops if they decided to hold their nest while a zombie rampaged at Pilgrim World, and that you abetted said zombie to rampage because Pugsley wanted a friend. Fucking moron. Of fucking course the cops are going to deal with matters that are immediately pertinent to them rather than acting on a possibility. It's not Minority Report, you dumbass. Also, are we now deciding that the outcasts of Nevermore are helpless? Because apparently they should be more than capable of dealing with Tyler because, you know, supernatural powers and all, even with how often the show itself forgets that when convenient. And while that isn't an excuse for the cops not to watch over Nevermore, it certainly makes what Wednesday and Enid did suicidal if the rest of Nevermore could have prepared themselves to fend him off. Dort, being the impromptu mediator, quells the beef by stating that while no one was hurt, that he's going to take extra precautions by issuing a school-wide curfew. Jesus Christ. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Hopefully, this time Dort can actually enforce this curfew rather than just being hot air blown out of Weems's ears. Speaking of, Wednesday looks over her shoulder as she suspects Weems is scolding her to follow. Inside Orlov's classroom, Weems correctly lambasts Wednesday for having let 2 Hydes go on the loose while having done little in the way to change the premonition, while Wednesday is only linearly focused on finding out whether the Galpins were good on their word of leaving Jericho. After much pushback from Wednesday, she finally asks Weems how she can regain her psychic ability, to which Weems sits her down to tell her an uncomfortable truth. That's something Wednesday likes, apparently, about them. Mainly, Wednesday has to repair the relationship between her and Morticia, as these psychic abilities are a familial link to her psychic abilities, which is not only contradicted by what Weems said about them in episode 5, but also contradicted by Wednesday having her powers during a time when she was extremely distant from both of her parents in season 1. Wednesday isn't the least bit interested in harboring emotion and much less about having Morticia insert herself into her life, echoing similar attitudes Wednesday had about Morticia back in season 1 that were quickly as resolved that they had been brought back up again, so suffice it to say it's not remotely compelling. Seeing as Fester isn't around to deliver Wednesday important information regarding Isaac, Orloff will be his surrogate, as so far he's been nothing but informal, yet also at times hazy, about info important to Wednesday. Example being, Wednesday asks Orloff if he ever taught Francois, to which he confirms as such, and that her surname used to be Knight before marrying Galpin. Additionally, Francois had a brother named Isaac, who was mentored by Dr. Stonehurst up until the incident at that lab at Diego Tower cost Isaac his life. The only thing Orloff doesn't know, but heavily alludes to, is whether Isaac's body went missing, whether he ran away, or was buried at that skull tree, clocking to Wednesday Pugsley's own culpability in having revived Isaac. Yeah, motherfucker can't remember Dr. Stonehurst's daughter's name, but can vividly recount his association with Isaac, apparently knows the secret, not much of one, lab at Diego Tower, and of his relation to Francois. I totally buy that logic. Also, Orloff mentions that Dr. Stonehurst and Isaac were thick as thieves, but seems to exclude a certain other person being close with Isaac we can get into when that is thrown at our feet later. Wednesday and Agnes storm into Caliban Hall to stop whatever scheme Pugsley and Eugene have gotten themselves up to in order for Wednesday to interrogate Pugsley about the last time he saw Isaac/Slurp. Pugsley isn't willing to pipe up about the information until Wednesday threatens him with waterboarding. Wait, I thought Pugsley missed being waterboarded by her. And Pugsley pipes up that he saw him at Pilgrim World and let him go, assuming he was just trying to live his life. Fuck it. Waterboard his ass, regardless if he told you this. It's the only justice we'll ever get for his actions. Although, for Wednesday's sake, she's not in the clear either, as she wasn't nearly as suspicious about Pugsley as she should have been when he fibbed about lugging Slurp to that camping trip in episode 3. Wednesday has Agnes go fetch up any dirt on Isaac like the good little soldier she is, while she continues to badger Pugsley as to anything else he can attest about Isaac. Apparently, Isaac left the Subject 1938 photo he took from that hitman at that haunted house for reasons that seem purely down to allow Pugsley to grab it and for Wednesday to retrieve it from him so that she can conclude that Isaac is looking for his sister. Because if Isaac is looking for his sister, then there would be no reason he would leave the only visual clue as to what she looks like for Pugsley to get his hands on. As for the Galpins, Tyler awakes astonished that his mother is indeed alive and in the flesh. The place they're currently holed up is some kind of secret bunker that Galpin made in the off chance that either she or Tyler had inexplicably transformed as a Hyde. Which means that with Galpin never using this bunker for Tyler during the events of Season 1, assuming this did exist during that time, vindicates him as not knowing for certain that Tyler was the Hyde rampaging. Tyler is still flummoxed that she's here, saying that he remembered her funeral like it was yesterday. So he remembered it when he was an infant then? More to the point, if she had died shortly after he was born, would he really have that much of a connection to her to garnish this kind of reaction? But despite what I said about how definitive Francois had been absent from Tyler's life, there will be additional crumbs of contradiction going into episodes 7 and 8 we can discuss when they happen. Also, despite what you likely assume is a warm reunion, Francois and Tyler are not exactly on the best of terms, as Francois has seen fit to chain Tyler to his bed because of his transformation, and that Tyler doesn't take kindly to her babying him or insinuating that she's his new master now. Francois asserts her position as his master by slapping him after he raises his voice, and then immediately shifts into overbearing mother mode, as though the dichotomy wouldn't be apparent. Much of how their relationship unfolds will pay dividends for things that happen into episodes 7 and 8 soon, especially when another of the family enters the fold, so keep in mind this dynamic for later. Akbay, Atway, Ophelia Way, all hay, Enid is solemnly sitting at her window before Bruno barges in to see how Enid is doing. You know, with how often people just insert and assert themselves at Ophelia Hall, there might as well not be a door for this room as far as I'm concerned, but regardless, Bruno thinks Enid is a bit rattled by their scrape with a Hyde, and Enid plays into that for her own benefit. In the midst of their conversation, Bruno's phone is getting blown up in text in a language Enid and the audience can't discern, but knowing it is going to incriminate Bruno for later, prompting Enid to assume that it's his mother again. Enid feels Bruno should be a bit more forthcoming about what's going on in his life, but he declines to before the two kiss some more. Their perpetual first basing gets cut short by Miss Capri, who scolds Bruno for being in Ophelia Hall based on that weird stipulation established in Season 1, so Bruno leaves for the two to discuss. Miss Capri is here to talk to Enid about seeing her wolfing out as opposed to anything to do with her dealing with Tyler, as it's unusual for someone like her to wolf out absent of a full moon. Capri suspects that Enid is an alpha based on a number of factors, including her transforming during that blood moon. So, the contrivance of Enid transforming at that time to save Wednesday was based on the contrivance of Enid to be an alpha? Color me surprised that bullshit for the sake of the plot allows more bullshit for the sake of the plot to occur. Enid is worried about being an alpha, as it implies that she'll be a lone wolf and thus will lose whatever social clout she had built between Season 1 and 2. While Miss Capri tries to reassure her that it's no guarantee, while reminding her of the newly established curfew via Dort, it is still something Enid has a lot of anxieties about. Unfortunately, the drama around Enid becoming an alpha will be saved for Season 3, and yes, despite my previously admonishing the possibility of there ever to be one, Season 3 has already been confirmed and is likely to release in 2027. There really is no rest for the wicked here, but getting back on topic, I can't imagine that when Season 3 does redress this plot beat that it will be as significant, given how Season 2 redressed the cliffhanger plot beats from Season 1. We cut to Hester doing some skeet shooting with Wednesday joining along for the ride, although her reasons to be here are purely to ask Hester for assistance about regaining her psychic ability. I guess some bitches really do have their crutch to lean on, but nevertheless, with Hester also being a Raven, Wednesday figures she knows best at how to reacquire them. Hester says that she used her abilities for deception, with Wednesday interjecting that she stopped using them after what had happened to Aunt Ophelia. Hester says,
Is that what your mother told you?
and this line has the depth of the Marianas Trench with how much subtext is hidden under that line, especially for the cliffhanger Season 2 saves for Season 3. After Hester rambles a bit, Wednesday gives her the photo of Francois and of her implication of having let her escape bereft of knowing that she was a Hyde, prompting Hester to talk about a figure known as Rosalind Rotwood. She was some esteemed raven with impeccable psychic abilities, so powerful were these abilities that traces of it can be found in a headstone of hers that Wednesday can temporarily commune with and in turn regain some of her psychic visions. Also, the cottage that Morticia and Gomez are shacked up at, which used to belong to Laurel by the way, was once Rosalind's as well, something that must have flown right over Laurel's head as of any importance given the events of Season 1. Not to mention, Morticia renamed the cottage into the Rotwood Cottage when Laurel called it the Rosewood Cottage. So did Morticia also know of the significance of this cottage when she transformed it? Day turns to night at Ophelia Hall, where Enid sashayed her way back into the hall from the rest of what Dort got up to, while Wednesday plans to scope out the Nevermore graveyard in spite of the aforementioned curfew. Like with Wednesday's plans to go to the Gates' mansion, there is no reason for her to go to this graveyard at night, other than a plot beat for later, especially when it contravenes the enforcement of that curfew like it did in Season 1. Also, regarding said curfew, Enid is concerned that if Wednesday is caught out of curfew, that the entire dorm would get barred from going to the gala, which seems oddly fatalistic of Dort to lump the blame of an entire dorm based on the actions of one, but perhaps this falls in line with his line to Ajax back in episode 4. Wednesday tells Enid that she's doing this under suspicion that Tyler and Francois aren't good on their word. Yeah, fuck you Morticia on believing they ever would be. And doesn't belabor imparting Enid how she'll discover that through the graveyard. This segues to both Enid and Wednesday getting at one another for what transpired last night, Enid pointing that Wednesday is brilliantly arrogant for someone who gets so much wrong, and Wednesday once more trying to do everything solo because depending on others results in failure. I'm sorry, but I thought Wednesday learned that it is sometimes good to lean on others, especially with her realization of how lonely she truly is at the tail end of episode 6 of season 1, and little in the way of what the Nightshades did that night had anything to do with failure and played out exactly as Wednesday expected it would, apart from Tyler somehow incapacitating all but Enid. Ruthlessly arrogant doesn't even describe how far Wednesday's head has been shoved up her own ass. Enid makes another compelling point that Wednesday thrives on stamping out the chaos she unfolds while simultaneously congratulating herself for doing so, and while these are biting remarks on Wednesday as a character, do feel a bit mean-spirited for Enid of all to say with what they've been through. Wednesday assumes that Enid thinks she's hot shit because she can transform before Enid ominously says,
"You have no idea what I'm capable of."
As an allusion to what Capri told her and the major conceit that will be a cliffhanger for season 3. But in any case, Enid is winning this argument between them. Although, like much of the writing in this season so far, it does lend much to laying it on thick the foreshadowing as Enid asks if Wednesday has ever tried to put herself in someone else's shoes before Wednesday makes her quippery remark and leaves Enid to fume. Do keep what she just said to Wednesday, as that will become more literal than you may realize. While Wednesday heads her way to the graveyard, we awkwardly cut to Thing storming into Ophelia Hall. Don't ask me how he managed to open the door this quickly, to let Enid know that Capri is doing dorm checks as part of the curfew, prompting Enid to chase after Wednesday so that she doesn't get barred from the gala by her moxie. Again, this tension was only built because Wednesday wanted to visit the graveyard at this time and not any time that didn't have a curfew hanging over their shoulders. At the graveyard itself, Wednesday finds Rotwood's headstone and the inscription that mentions a curse that will be put on Wednesday if she incidentally averts its gaze as she attempts to commune with it. Once she does, she gets transposed, at least I think that's what is happening, to the aforementioned seance chamber in the Rotwood cottage and is greeted by the apparition of Rosalind Rotwood, played by none other than Lady Gaga. Well, I guess that weird TikTok trend involving the Wednesday show actually paid off then? And the influence that Lady Gaga has on the show extends farther than just a small role in the show. So I guess Lady Gaga wanted to cash her check on the show going into season 2? Anyhow, Rotwood is curious as to what Wednesday is doing in her chambers, with Wednesday asserting that Grandma insisted that reading her inscription would grant her the sight necessary to deal with the Gulpins. Rotwood goes on some spiel about how Hester didn't have the right stuff to be a true Raven, while sensing the potential in Wednesday purely on her overbearing arrogance. Once is a fluke, twice is a coincidence, according to Wednesday, right? Especially with the time between Enid saying Wednesday is arrogant, along with Rotwood in turn. Wednesday isn't interested in the sophistry and just wants to cut to the meat of what she desires, with Rotwood pointing that she needs to hold her hand to the fire, literally, in order to regain her sight. Additionally, Rotwood iterates what the inscription mentioned of there being a price to pay if she breaks her poise on the fire and in turn, the gaze the Raven has on her. Once more, this will be important for the main squeeze of episode 6. Once Wednesday does hold her hand to the fire, she gets her brief glimpses of her psychic visions with panning shots of Francois and Tyler, the latter more menacing than the former, before Enid stomps in at just the opportune moment to break Wednesday's grasp from the fire and her gaze from the Raven, causing the two to share a glance before being knocked out from whatever price was paid to the Piper. As for these visions Wednesday gets, no, they are not in the least way helpful, nor even allude to anything that happens in episode 7 or 8, and are more an analogy to Wednesday's own self-destructive desires to seek knowledge however she can get it. And good thing that Enid had a reason to go look for Wednesday in duress, because Wednesday decided to do this at night, otherwise there wouldn't have been any consequences of Wednesday doing this at all. Enid and Wednesday inexplicably wake up in their beds, with the former quite distraught as to what they are seeing, and the latter freaking out uncontrollably upon their realization. As it's immediately apparent to the two of them, they have inadvertently swapped bodies and now have to wrestle with the advantages and disadvantages the two share day by day. Think of it like the show's own version of Freaky Friday, if you will. Also, because I know you'll be confused if I refer to them by their names until they turn back, I will refer to Wednesday and Enid's body as Weenid, and Enid and Wednesday's body as Ensday going forward. As for how the two managed to get back into their dorms without causing them or the dorm to get barred from the gala, yeah, feels like a consequence the writers did not want to tussle with, especially with the matter of events regarding episode 7. I also like how having the two swap bodies gives great opportunity for the actors to flex their acting chops, as despite the two maintaining the same voice and body, had to adapt to the particular mannerisms and how they carry themselves, as Jenna Ortega has to look meek, helpless, and disarmed in her cadence, whereas Emma Myers has to maintain a stony glare with a completely rigid posture and monotone delivery. There is unfortunately a bit of an inconsistency as to what particular drawbacks the two do carry, as despite Weenid being trapped in Enid's body, still has Weems as a spirit guide as opposed to Ensday being inundated with Weems. Not to mention, Weenid will also inherit the werewolf qualities of Enid, leaving Ensday with not much to take advantage of, save for Agnes. As for Weems, she tells Weenid that averting her gaze at the Raven statue caused them to swap bodies, and it'll be up to her to figure out how to undo it. Ensday is immediately insistent that they figure out a means to undo this while trying everything she can to prevent Weenid from walking out of Ophelia Hall in their uncouth manner. As the two walk out, Weenid advises that the two keep their body swap a secret between them, Ensday adding that Weenid should avoid Bruno, while Weenid tells Ensday to avoid her family as well. Of course, this means hijinks will ensue, and the two will inevitably have to contend with the things they are trying to avoid to obfuscate this predicament they are in. And usually situations like this do a good job of excavating these characters and exploring their worlds in another person's body, or shoes, as Enid put it. As an example, or many, regarding Ensday, Bianca calls to Enid to come take a seat with Ensday responding enthusiastically, getting looks of confusion from her that Wednesday is the one acting like this. Weenid tells Ensday to act natural as far as Wednesday Addams is concerned, with Ensday doing very little in the way of acting naturally as her. This extends to Ensday being jump scared by Agnes, who was out to give her the morning coffee along with any info she dug up about Isaac Knight, given Enid's own disposition to Agnes thus far. Ensday is of course completely in the dark as to who Isaac Knight is, as well as Agnes being Wednesday's personal chauffeur, and much of Ensday's behavior to Agnes will become immediately suspicious to Agnes most of all, given she would know all the ins and outs about Wednesday. As for Weenid, she walks out somewhere before getting surprised by Bruno, who gets immediately tossed by Weenid because of her inexplicable kung fu knowledge, and is equally as perplexed as to what he assumes is Weenid's sudden new outlook towards him. Weenid, having the kind of knowledge she does pertaining to parts of the plot, will be important regarding Bruno later. Back to Ensday, she had ordered Enid's usual espresso drink, which is typically saturated with color, and Agnes did make a comment about how Ensday should be allergic to color. This was something that was also established in the first minutes of episode 1 of season 1, and surprisingly, this is consistent with how Wednesday had been around color, even as far as cupping her hand when she opened that door with the scrunchie. Ensday gets first-hand proof of this allergic reaction as her face and her wrists are gaining a rash, before running into Morticia, who assists Ensday with this predicament. After Ensday gets some special cream to treat her allergy, she finds it such an amazing remedy that she asks Morticia what's inside of it. Morticia does answer, but doesn't find it immediately peculiar that Ensday is asking her this, when Morticia would likely assume Ensday already knows what's in said cream, but regardless, Morticia does find it peculiar that Ensday calls her mom, and that her spirits are, well, more spirited than usual. There's some other hijinks involving some kind of prescription medication before Morticia invites Ensday to a family dinner this night, something Ensday wants to say no to on account of the awkwardness, but does try to stammer her way out by mentioning Dort's school curfew. Morticia says that the matter has already been resolved, with Dort giving them an exception for tonight, which would rely on Ensday having initially agreed to this dinner in the first place, leaving Ensday in a rough spot to navigate said dinner this night. Weenid returns to the Rotwood headstone and assumes that she can merely do the same she did last night to rectify the situation. Weems chimes in that that won't work so easily, adding on that this situation put Weenid and Ensday on borrowed time, as according to Weems, 2 other Ravens had died within 24 hours of performing this stunt. meaning that the premonition about Enid dying was purely on Wednesday being interrupted in a ritual by Enid for the two to trade spaces, which technically means this would be Enid's fault that she's dying? And what a fucking cop-out that is, that Wednesday's premonition came about by her trying to find out how that premonition comes about. It's basically on the level of stories having a prophecy trope, something that was also a victim of the story writing of Wednesday Season 1. Also, because we now know the specifics of this premonition means that Wednesday had no reason to base the premonition based on the avian, with or without the existence of crows, and once more, ran her mouth before her ass could catch up to it. A foible constantly noted in Season 1, but barely criticized by the show and still yet to be criticized even with Weems signposting it as such. More on the hilarity that ensues Weenid and Wednesday, we gotta get back to the Galpins and Isaac. At the Galpin house, Isaac is rummaging through a medicine cabinet and notices that he has nearly reformed his body, face and all, before taking a gander at the doghouse outside. Scrutinizing it over, he sees some kind of rail indent and pushes the doghouse to discover the aforementioned secret bunker that Tyler and Francois have holed up in. Keep in mind, we have no reference for how far away the Galpin house is from Jericho, but suffice it to say it has to be close enough if folks like Tyler can get to Nevermore from here on foot. So yes, Francois did not, in fact, hold true to her word like a mother would. Morticia. Tyler and Francois are having their meal before hearing a knocking on the bunker door, and Francois readies herself with gun in hand for whomever, whatever comes through. Isaac slowly enters and Francois can't believe what she's seen, as though the concept of anyone actually dying in this fucking story is an absurd stretch given that many assume she died as well. Isaac helps reassure Francois that it's really him by mentioning some anecdote about her first transformation as a Hyde, and the details of this are vague but could be alluding to her dating Sheriff Galpin from what he says, and that's enough for Francois to embrace him. Francois introduces Tyler to his long-lost uncle, something Tyler is taken slightly aback by and unsure of how to respond to that revelation. Before the two can get properly acquainted, the matter regarding Francois's cuffing fits hits center stage, as Francois tells Tyler that being a long-lived Hyde comes with its own problems. Isaac pipes up that it was his dream to try to help Francois any which way he can to extract these Hyde powers, with Francois chiming to Isaac of the complications regarding the Stonehursts. Of course, Isaac had that matter already taken care of regarding both Judy and Augustus. Yeah, want to tell us how you managed that? And insists that they can use the machine retrofitted at the lowest program in Willow Hill to assist Francois. What with her mentioning that the Stonehurst copied similar schematics to one at Nevermore. Yep, that means that when Judy told Wednesday that all she'd find at Willow Hill was some dusty files, that was a load of horseshit, and additionally, Fester's superpowered shock did not cause any permanent damage to the machine when it was right behind them when they made their escape either. Lucky for the three of them. Also going forward, what with these three being their own troupe, I will delectfully call them the Galpin Gang whenever they get up to shenanigans. Isaac says that he needs to visit an old friend, euphemism for his next victim, at Nevermore before they can go about saving Francois from her condition. As for Nevermore, we cut to Weenid performing on the cello as per usual before Miss Capri walks in and is utterly surprised that Enid could play so effectively, such that she believes Enid has evoked Wednesday. Okay, how many more times are characters going to lay on the foreshadowing like this? Weenid plays it off as some kind of thinking exercise before the matter of Enid being an alpha rears in, much to Weenid's surprise and Capri's concern that she's trying to deny her being an alpha. Miss Capri emphasizes that Weenid needs to get into the looping cages before sundown, which will factor plot-wise, and as Weenid walks away, she notices a portrait of Rosalind Rotwood at her cottage. This, for some reason, clues Weenid to go investigate the cottage itself when Hester earlier told her about the seance chamber in said cottage and was physically transposed there too, no less. And are we also supposed that this is the first time that Weenid has seen this portrait in the first place? Regardless, Weenid waltzes into the cottage and once more is quick to find a fake panel in one of the bedrooms that has hidden said seance chamber. As she snoops around, she notices some kind of romance novel and a transcript of another written by a pseudonym of Morticia, as apparently she too is a novelist like Wednesday is. This will only factor into some drama regarding episode 7, but do keep a lid on this as to Morticia's reason for hiding this part about herself. Enid hears a beckon of Rosalind calling out to her before getting spooked by a bony hand and of Rosalind's face superimposed on the statue, and honestly it's more hilarious than spooky from this frame. Enid asks how she can undo this curse, and Rosalind says that she needs to be willing to die in this borrowed skin, and that she has until dawn to unravel the secrets of the person they've borrowed. I don't know if Rosalind is being literal with the concept of dying, because that would mean that there would be no way to break this curse, as either scenario would result in death, especially of Enid if Wednesday has tried to undo the premonition. And as for these secrets, well, it's more or less the two need to confide in one another towards the end of episode 6, less so than uncovering secrets. Enid gets interrupted of the riddle by Morticia, who is curious why Enid is out snooping in their cottage and in the seance chamber. Enid tries to misdirect by mentioning the romance novel and transcript, and Morticia quite profoundly denies the accusation, along with saying that there is much that she keeps to herself from Wednesday. And this too is more significant of a line than you'd realize. Morticia concludes that Wednesday put Enid up to this, and that she'll discuss with Wednesday the matter of having her friend go do her dirty work at dinner. As for Wednesday, she's freaking out about having narrowly convinced Morticia that she is who she is, wanting Think to help play into the role of Wednesday. Think can't on account of some support group meeting he's going to attend, which is all factors padding, plot, and humor in one, if you can believe that. So Wednesday figures that she can get some Adams intel around Wednesday's personal desk. Thing is a bit nervous about Wednesday doing this, as she comes across the partially burned manuscript that Wednesday, by the way, doesn't care if anyone would read it, and finds the fictional version of Enid Wednesday wrote about her. To her frustration, she finds that Wednesday's fictionalization of Enid are what Wednesday actually thinks about her, mostly negative, a slight too far for Wednesday that she'll do something drastic to embarrass Wednesday in her own body. So the things that Wednesday describes this fictional character are things that Wednesday has said directly to Enid's face, and that, regardless if Wednesday does think that way about her, her actions towards Enid speak more so than any words could. Like, are we deciding that Wednesday is insecure about what Wednesday thinks of her, knowing that she's an open book of vitriol towards anyone and everyone? This also contextualizes the opening scene of episode 6 of season 2, as Wednesday was making a public spectacle of herself to get at Enid, and not so much Wednesday actually losing her mental faculties. Noting that this takes place 16 hours after Wednesday and Enid were talking to Santiago and Dort, means that that discussion would have had to have happened in the late afternoon for this to take place during the day, and early in the day too, no less. As Wednesday exploits Wednesday's body like this, she gets the nasty side effect of wearing all that color to the bemusement of the crowd and the absolute fury of Enid in witness to all this. Enid gets her own one-up on Wednesday, although whether that is or not is a stretch, by way of Bruno, who is talking to whomever in his native tongue before Enid storms in. Enid apparently knows the Filipino language well and is able to discern from what Bruno said that he had a long-distance affair with someone while having a relationship with Enid, while getting another eyebrow raised from me, with Enid describing this as a time-honored misogynistic deception. Granted, Bruno is a prick for doing this, but I don't know if his motivation to do this was purely to flex his masculinity on Enid rather than just being selfish. But yes, unfortunately, this is true of what Enid purports, and whatever goodwill I had built for Bruno has been stamped out thusly. But we do have to speculate as to whether Enid was doing this to actually look out for Wednesday, or was just trying to find any flimsy reason to have the two break up to get back at what Wednesday did with her body, because while Bruno does confirm as such that he has a complicated relationship with this woman abroad, Enid's own motivations to eavesdrop on Bruno are going to be entirely down to getting at Wednesday with the recency bias of these two scenes. As Enid breaks up with Bruno, Miss Capri also storms in and demands that she get herself put into the looping cages ASAP. Enid tries to dodge, but Capri is oddly insistent, such that Enid does comply with her demands and will be in the cages when we see her again for later. I guess Bruno is also not curious as to why his girlfriend needs to be put in the cages this emphatically, but perhaps he's still recoiling from the breakup. And who else but to witness all this but fucking Agnes, who I guess was spying on Enid out of noticing the discrepancy of her behavior normally, because of course Agnes is wherever the plot needs her to be in many more places than just one. Speaking of plot, Wednesday is back at Ophelia Hall, taking solace in the public embarrassment she made of Wednesday before Agnes plops into existence to scare the daylights out of her. On top of noticing Wednesday being on Enid's bed, along with having Enid's phone, Agnes suspects something is deeply wrong with Wednesday after her little stunt, but her conclusions are more convoluted than the frankly simple yet supernatural. Because Wednesday did have Enid's phone, Agnes is able to segue this to mentioning that Enid is in the looping cages as a result of no electronics, which if that is the case, why didn't that strike Wednesday as curious why she wasn't around? Moreover, because Agnes overheard everything involving that breakup, she can tell Wednesday that as well, which gets her quite infuriated to even the surprise of Agnes that she would even care. And this too somehow compels Agnes to mention to Wednesday about the premonition involving Enid as a way to compel her out of the looping cages, coming as a complete shock to Wednesday that Wednesday would have kept this from her the entire time. Yeah, me too, especially with how much of a wedge it was forming on top of Enid's own conflicting sense of empowerment, but at least now it can't be used past this point. Because of Wednesday feeling at a loss about this discovery, Agnes decides to make a dangerous proposal that Enid has been causing problems for her and that she should disconcern herself of Enid in favor of having Agnes be their best friend, while throwing some other shade at Enid. Wednesday, already at her limit, mouths off Agnes that she's a sycophantic loser and that she should stay invisible, getting Agnes upset enough that she leaves the hall. Whether this was said to Wednesday or Wednesday, this was a remarkably callous thing for Agnes to even entertain the notion that she shouldn't concern herself of Enid, that I imagine that Wednesday would have said the same, if not worse, to Agnes. So, sorry if I'm not going to feel particularly bad for Agnes, even if her conclusion about Wednesday arrived at the wrong work to get there. And I'm sure this should be something that Wednesday should tell Enid about as per another reason why she shouldn't be so buddy-buddy with Agnes, as this is her explicit desire to replace Enid, be it life or death, but we can get to that when relevant. We cut to the briefly discussed support group where Orloff and Thing are joined by a menagerie of other disembodied body parts who are trying to feel whole, whom are also joined by Agnes, who needs any kind of counseling with her being written off by Wednesday. Again, if they didn't make Agnes a duplicitous shitheel just a few moments earlier, I may have had some sympathy towards her feeling invisible in the face of wanting friends, but given her methodology and ideology in regard to that, she doesn't deserve shit. Agnes being here with Orloff and the support group will also serve narrative importance for later. As for Thing being here, he's signing languages to Orloff, who is the global interpreter to what he's saying, as Thing isn't sure where he comes from, and that the only clue to his past was of some kind of signet ring. In the prior episodes, there were moments where Thing would either put on the ring or inspect it, and I initially assumed this was given to him by Enid as a way for him to belong to Nevermore, but the actual significance of this ring and of his past will become the biggest powder keg involving Wednesday Season 2 we get, so unfortunately I was dismissive as to the narrative significance of Thing's character arc until now. Orloff makes some philosophy about how you are more than the sum of the parts and that at times the part is greater than the whole, before we then cut to the family dinner at the cottage. A good portion of this dinner is played up for humor, as Wednesday is quite uncomfortable with the unconventional choice of meal prepared for the Addams family, until Morticia and Gomez break up the liveliness of it with some serious discussion. The two are aware that Pugsley and Wednesday have been lying and that they need to confess about what they've done, and is only here where Pugsley admits to his father that he lied to him about Slurp, something Gomez already knows, but that's besides the point. Seeing as this too is only used to joke about what kind of punishment Pugsley will receive, as opposed to capital punishment, the writers have yet again swept his bloodshed under the tablecloth. As for Wednesday, she initially assumes that Morticia is going to discover that she isn't who she's pretending to be until Morticia brings up seeing Enid at the secret seance chamber. Wednesday absolutely has no clue about this, which of course Morticia takes this as her lying, and with Wednesday's mannerisms to her from the morning and now, Morticia comes to the conclusion that the lack of her psychic visions has made her lose her mind. But before Morticia can properly handle treating Wednesday properly, she gets upset about some other presence intruding upon the conversation until Weems inexplicably shows up, despite having prior established that Enid still is in tune with her spirit guide. The only reason Weems is here now is to exposit to Morticia that she is Wednesday's new spirit guide, and that Wednesday had communed with Rotwood's headstone to gain temporary sight before it backfired, causing she and Enid to have swapped bodies. Yep, that was the biggest cop-out reveal of them having swapped their bodies to Morticia that I've seen, on top of Morticia being able to communicate with Weems, albeit indirectly this way as well. Not to mention the nature of Weems being a spirit guide does not at all coincide how good he behaved as Wednesday's prior spirit guide as well. Morticia asks Wednesday if Enid is inside there, and she confirms as such, nervously, as well as telling Morticia where Enid currently is. Weems, from this revelation, cruelly suggests that Wednesday and Enid have to sort this mess out themselves, and there is no reason why they have to do this alone apart from making it that much harder for the two of them to resolve it. But it's especially cruel for Weems to say this, given Wednesday has no fucking clue what Weems is even saying. Morticia iterates what Weems said to Wednesday about freeing Enid with no assurance that she can assist in any way, even tangentially. Meanwhile, Isaac has inexplicably gotten himself inside Nevermore, although with the bullshit invention of those hidden tunnels, maybe that's how he gets around, and greets Orloff to his utter shock. According to Orloff, Isaac died 30 years ago, and once more, this specific number will be important regarding episode 8, as well as the Garrett Gates' incident, if you can believe that. Regardless, the reason that Isaac is here to collect some kind of power source for his experiments from Orloff's robotic doohickey, as Orloff did mouth off to Wednesday earlier about him having one, but the nature of this power source is going to cause problems again for the creation of the Lois program, as well as the transference of this power source between them. As for poor Orloff, well, Isaac wants his midnight snack of him, and may I remind you that Isaac was only capable of doing this because of the collective interference by Fester, Wednesday, Pugsley, Gomez, and Morticia, given that he's allowed this courtesy by the Gulpin Gang. So that's 9 kills on his belt that are all, in some way, the Addams family's fault. And who else but to discover Isaac doing this but Agnes, although at least this time she doesn't do so while invisible, who shrieks and cloaks herself, much to Isaac's confusion upon seeing the partially consumed Orloff. Assuming that Isaac has been had, he decides to book it with the power source to the witness of Agnes's despair. Not sure what Agnes had planned to do going to Dr. Orloff's class this late at night before Isaac ran in, and feels purely for the sake of Agnes becoming more than dutiful in dealing with the Gulpin Gang later. Outside of Nevermore, Isaac returns with the power source, explaining to Tyler and Francois briefly that he needed it after the electrical systems in Willow Hill got fried. How would he know this, even with him being present at it? And this detail will get convoluted when we discover the exact nature of this machine later. They hear a bit of commotion outside, so Francois has Tyler go investigate around. Tyler notices the trunk of the car is ajar, so he opens it to only now discover the corpse of Judy stuffed inside. Given that the car the Gulpin Gang are driving was also Judy's car, did that not ever occur to Tyler how Isaac got his hands on it? Tyler returns to the car to say that there was nothing, and of course, Agnes pulled a Wednesday by stuffing herself in the car while invisible to, I guess, see where they are heading. Again, this will be important for how Enid and Wednesday get roped up into this. As for them, Wednesday goes to the looping cages. By the way, really dated meme on the decal of these doors here, and frees Enid from them, who was just pacing around wall to wall. Wednesday also informs Enid that she knows about the premonition, as well as of the two of them dying if they don't resolve this body swap by dawn. Interestingly, Wednesday believes that there was distrust from Enid about telling her this, despite prior admonishing Enid for looking out for her. So good going there on Ensei being just as much of a turbo cunt as Enid can be. Before the drama between these two can devolve, Ensei gets a call from Agnes on Enid's phone, whom also has Agnes as a contact. Remember, these two do not like each other, to tell Wednesday that she discovered Tyler and Isaac and stuffed herself in the car that they are currently driving. She shares a location with Wednesday, who shows it to Enid, who concludes that they are heading back to Willow Hill. That's a bit of a stretch for Enid to make, but perhaps she's made that conclusion what with Isaac and Stonehurst being close. Also, do keep in note where Willow Hill is relative to Jericho, as though they hadn't already established that you need to drive there to arrive reasonably, as it'll be important for later. Enid decides against having Wednesday and her swap back and prioritize saving Agnes from her predicament along with taking down the Gulping Gang. At Willow Hill, or specifically the lowest facility, the power core that Isaac Knight took from Orloff does indeed repower this machine in some parts of the corridor around this facility, calling into question why the Stonehursts didn't have a power core of their own, nor ever attempt snatching it from Orloff when Judy wanted to carry her father's legacy. And remember, supposedly this contraption of Orloff's was a creation of Isaac's between then and now, which was 30 years, and if this machine is necessary to extract Hyde powers from Francois, then Judy would have more than good reason to acquire it. Also, this machine more than likely was a mock-up of the one created at Iago Tower after Isaac died, so there wouldn't be any reason why Augustus Stonehurst wouldn't have a power core handy if he knew the means of which to power it. Regardless, Isaac has set up preparations for Francois and is delighted to know that he can remove this curse from her. Tyler takes exception to the notion that being a Hyde is a curse, saying that it's the most free he's ever felt. I'm sorry, how? You were subliminally compelled by someone else to do their bidding, and that discovering that your mother was a Hyde, according to Wednesday, didn't free you of that burden either. Both Francois and Isaac retort fairly to Tyler by reminding him that Isaac is trying to save his fucking mother from dying, less so than wanting to remove her powers, but unfortunately, this divide between the three of them will meet out the farther we go along. Agnes is also here in witness to this. Also, don't ask me how any of them know the passcode to get in here, so we'll just have to write it off as the door was wide open, who is able to hide from their sight until Tyler hears some clatter and somehow gets a hold of Agnes. And supposedly Agnes can't just turn invisible again to confuse Tyler as to what he's trying to grab onto, or fight back against something he can't even see. I think the writers are really underestimating how powerful invisibility is against people. Tyler asks Isaac what to do with one of Wednesday's friends. Not sure how he knows that, but whatever. And Isaac opts to just throw her in one of the cells as a after-experiment snack for him. As for Enid and Wednesday, they just happen to show up just as the experiment begins, despite the prior establishment of how far Willow Hill is, as well as that image proving just how far it is from Jericho and by extension, Nevermore. Guess Wednesday didn't need to hide in Miss Capri's car, nor steal the driving instructor's car then. Once Tyler returns to the console, he sees Isaac power up the machine, which, by the way, is being powered by a core that was used for what was basically a mobility scooter for Orloff, so a bit dissonant as to how much this core could power, while Enid sneaks into the cell to assist Agnes. Tyler returns to see Enid attempting to free Agnes before getting jostled a bit by Wednesday. He's able to throw her off, but as he does, Enid gives him a Sparta kick clear back into the halls of the cell. And I guess while all of this is going on, Francois and Isaac are non-existent to react to any of this happening. This sudden surge of strength by Enid was foreshadowing for her to begin wolfing out to the fear of both Wednesday and Agnes, who the former gets thrown aside by Tyler as he attempts to close the cell in front of Enid, and the latter turns invisible to fuck around with all the knobs on the console to bring the machine haywire. Just a demonstration of how easily it is to mess around while invisible. Tyler tries to fix his situation to no avail as he turns his attention back to Wednesday before a thumping can be heard from the cell door. Enid has transformed, although taking the qualities of Wednesday a la Skyrim werewolf more so than werewolf during Pride Month like Enid. Tyler attempts to transform to fend off werewolf Enid, but gets distracted by Francois before getting throttled by Enid. Yes, this does make it so Tyler can't turn into a Hyde at this moment, meaning that with enough bodies you can just smother him from doing so like the Nightshades could have done towards the end of episode 5. Now, Enid has many good reasons to kill the fuck out of Tyler at this very moment, and there's basically nothing stopping her but time. But alas, Wednesday yells to Enid that they have to leave, and she acquiesces, throwing Tyler aside. Would you believe me if I were to tell you that Enid will have another opportunity to kill Tyler later, and doesn't? Yeah, better saved for episode 8. The Gang's plans to save Francois from her condition are foiled as they and the triage of Ophelia Hall run from the lab before it explodes. Should we discuss how what Isaac and Tyler were doing was noble, even barring that they've killed people to get to this point? Was that not ever a consideration to Agnes when she tracked them this far, or likely overheard their conversations before deciding to mess up this console? As our plucky band of ne'er-do-wells run away, Enid is recoiling from transforming back into herself as Wednesday comforts her. It is here where Wednesday for once thanks Enid for saving her, finally clocking to Agnes that the two had swapped bodies as a misunderstanding. Lucky for Agnes, then, that Wednesday does not bring up to Enid that she wanted her to forget about Enid, nor did Agnes feel any regret about what she said to Wednesday, whether or not she said it because Wednesday wasn't acting herself as of late. So she too can join the morally reprehensible bunch. Agnes thinks this body swap is permanent, reminding to both Wednesday and Enid the urgency of them fixing this issue. They head back to the Rotwood headstone where Enid tells Wednesday that the two need to unravel the innermost secrets about themselves, as was stated by Rotwood. Wednesday starts by confiding in Enid that while she is fearless, that her one fear is of her mother and whether she'll accept her as who she is, and is why she constantly pushes her away. Enid finds this illuminating and compliments Wednesday for her quiet strength and that she shouldn't let people like Bruno mistake her kindness for weakness, something that I did not get any inkling of in the time those two were together, and if anything, Wednesday was the one who mistook Enid's kindness for weakness. But I suppose this is Enid's single moment of introspection that she underestimated Wednesday's potential, as per that line by Enid, and this confiding in one another is enough for the two to once again slump over the headstone and return back to their original bodies. Thank God I don't have to refer to them as Enid and Wednesday anymore, because it was starting to get confusing for me to make the difference. As the two are reunited back in their bodies, Weems comes in to give a distant glare to Wednesday. She has Enid go back to her dorm so that she and Weems can discuss. Fortunately, Wednesday has stopped the premonition of Enid dying, but as a result of her actions, has put the death of another at risk. Who, you might ask? Well, Weems and Wednesday walk to another spooky hallucination of a grave, where Weems points to a broken headstone of a Adams family member written on it, and that now, any one of the Adams family members may die, and it's up to Wednesday to figure out whom before the episode ends. Unsure of how what transpired during episode 6 led to this moment, unless Agnes destroying the machine at Willow Hill was the culprit of it, actions of hers and not Wednesday's. But more to the point, why was the premonition of Enid's death only extend to 6 episodes out of the 8? I would have assumed that this would have been an ongoing issue for Wednesday up until the very last episode, but now this show is going to have to juggle in the last 2 episodes a completely different premonition for the audience to concern themselves with? But regardless, that was episode 6, a frankly schizophrenic episode to tackle not only with its sheer length compared to the rest, but also of trying to track the Freaky Friday nature of Wednesday and Enid swapping bodies. Episode 6 also carries with it the fallout of the show's morally derelict actions from episode 5 as it continues to carry water for Morticia to let Francois and Tyler slide, along with Pugsley's, to the point that I would want any one of them to die if this new premonition holds true. Even with that out of the way, we still get a litany of conveniences, contrivances, and literal stretches of the show's setting to unlock characters for their cue for the plot. As for what remains of Wednesday Season 2, well, you'll have to wait for the final part of this analysis.